Welcome to Iron and Ceremony, Librarius Omnis, where we explore the depths of the Black Library.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Iron and Ceremony present Librarius Omnis. This is the second half of our look into the sixth book in the Horus Heresy series, Descent of Angels. If you haven't already, go back and check out the first half where we cover part 1 and 2 of the book. If you're up to date, then good. We're about to get into parts 3 and 4. I'm John, and as always, I'm joined by Shane. How you doing, mate?
I'm all good, thank you. All good. Good to be talking more Black Library.
Yes, been looking forward to getting through this one. So before we get into part 3 and 4, do you want to give us the flyby recap of the first half?
Indeed. Yeah. So the book itself, as we talked about in the first one, it's 4 parts, which are, they're quite well structured. Parts 1 and 2. 1 sees us introduced to Caliban, the Order, which is one of the knightly orders, some of the other knightly orders that are on Caliban, a bit of like the history, that it's a bit of a feudal world, that they've had technology, but they've forgotten it. And it's like a lot of planets cut off during the Age of Strife, and introduces us to a few of the important characters in the Dark Angels lore. So the likes of Luther, who is very senior and would have been one of the commanders, had he not found the lion, and we obviously get introduced to the lion as well. So we follow it all through the eyes of one supplicant or applicant, whichever way it is, to the order, a guy called Zahariel, and then his cousin Nemiel, and they compete with each other. There's a lot going on in terms of relationship. So they are cousins, but they're also a bit like brothers. So those guys, we hear about a lot of the things happening through the eyes of those two. And then what happens from there is we then see, we develop the Knightly Order story, and the idea of going on a beast quest, or you have to kill these great beasts, chaos-like animals that inhabit Caliban. And that's really the first part 1. And then part 2, we move into the knightly orders and the conflicts that occur between the 2 knightly orders. So in this particular instance, it's the Knights of Lupus, and we follow what's an excellent passage in terms of a battle, where now that all the great beasts, or the quest to take out the great beasts is finished, the crusade, should I say, they turn their attentions to the Knights of Lupus and the last stronghold of these beasts, discover that they've been effectively collecting them and creating a bit of a zoo. And there's a great passage, there's a couple of epic battles and scenes that take place in part 2. And we also get an underlying view of the dynamic between Luther and the Lion, and not necessarily between those two, but how the rest of the angels see them and the rest of the knightly orders see them, because they both jointly slay this giant beast that's laying waste to a load of them. But the lion's the one that gets the applaud, it's the focus, and so on and so forth. And that kind of brings us up to the end of the first half of the book. I probably missed a couple of key points, but that gives you the gist of it.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke obviously in the last video. Hopefully you've seen it. If you want the details, then obviously go back and watch it. But yeah, I mean, that is the flyby version, which brings us up to where we are now. I think so. That brings us into part 3, which is Imperium. So when just to bring us right up to speed, the last sort of chapter brought us to Zahariel and Nemiel. Were part of the storm on the final keep of the Knights of Lupus. They came across the commander, Lord Sartana, who basically told them that the lion was going to lead Caliban to ruin. And then before they could kill him, he offered himself. And that was sort of where we left it. So where we join now is in that same scene. The lion later comes across Zahariel and Nemiel in the chamber, standing over the body of Lord Sultana, and they were in this giant library, which, as the lion comes in, he obviously sees all these books, and he orders all the books to be removed, put into wagons, and sent back to their fortress at Alduruk. And then before got that one right,
Alduruk, yeah.
And once they're happy that all the Knights of Lupus are dead, they have that fortress destroyed and raze it to the ground. So once they're happy, they start the march back to their fortress, and it's sort of noted that Zahariel is sort of still mulling over the words of Lord Sultana, wondering, did actually the lion force this war to happen? Is this what he wanted? Although earlier on they'd sort of made this a no, we want you to side with us. The doubt is starting to seep in that actually the lion's not as peaceful as he appears to be. So as a result of the battle, the other two members of the friendship group, Elias and Attius, both secured their knighthoods, and they're entered into Sahadriel's sword line along with Nemiel and Zahariel. Sahadriel, in the last chapter, he got taken out by one of the beasts.
He did indeed, yeah.
But lucky for him, he survived because he's a tough old git. And Zahariel sort of mulling over the fact that he managed to get into some fights with some beasts, but the powers that he had that came through him when he fought the Calibanite lion didn't return, and he's sort of wondering what happened there, and also realizing that his memories from the woods earlier, where he met the Watchers, he's struggling to remember the details of what happened. So it's sort of strange of what's going on there. Someone sort of actively blocking him, or what's going on. And then, as the final beasts are starting to finally get cleared out, and the last hunt's declared, and it looks like the Order has achieved domination of Caliban, the angels arrive.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. And this takes part, I think the book jumps back slightly before that. So all the heroes essentially of the Order are assembled, and they're put together and say, right, this is our last quest. Anybody who's anybody, you're going to come, and it's a bit of a mix of the old and bold, the new heroes, and some supplicants who need to get blooded. So we have Luther, the Lion, Zahariel, Nemiel, and the new Lord Cypher. And obviously, for those who don't remember, the previous Lord Cypher went out on his own quest early on in the book, and was never seen again, and obviously is assumed dead because it was obviously an old man. We don't know who the new Lord Cypher is. It was believed that Master Remiel was going to take over, but it hasn't. That hasn't happened, and no one quite knows why. And obviously, we touched on before that no one actually knows who Lord Cypher is. So I was wondered if you know, Shane, because obviously everyone was saying, "Oh, it's going to be Master Remiel," but then if he took on that mantle and then disappeared, then everyone would know who he is. Yeah, so
that's the weird thing, isn't it? Like, they don't. It's definitely, we know it's definitely not Master Remiel. We know that's who it's not. But the whole character of Cypher, once they change, is played really almost deceptively. Like it's very mysterious. You don't know who he is. You don't know anything about him, and you don't know his background. You don't know who's actually appointed him. Was it the Lion? Was it Luther? Was it more than one person that decided it? And we don't know what his aims and ambitions are. Like we know from the old Lord Cypher, who, as you said, was an old man, very much there to keep traditions. and stuff like that. At the moment, all we know about this particular incarnation of Cypher is very much shrouded in mystery, and his input into the story, at least at this point, is more. It comes across as more antagonistic, rather than helpful, which is what the old Lord Cypher was. But that's about all we really get to know of him.
Yeah, we don't really, other than like one or two conversations where I think he gets a couple of lines out, we don't actually get any more from him, I don't think.
No.
But one thing, I'm just, obviously, we don't know his identity, and nor do the Order. But he's not wearing a mask, is he? Like, that's never mentioned. Like,
no.
Someone must recognise him, because he hasn't come out of thin air.
I think though, I don't know whether it's the way to do with it. Like, if you did know who he was before, you're not allowed to, mention it or talk about it, because it's like when they take on that role, the old them goes, so they would never acknowledge. If it was Ramiel, and like Zahariel was like, "Hey, how's it going? Do you remember when you talked?" He'd never acknowledge it anyway.
Right. Okay. So it's everyone knows who he is, but now he's Lord Cypher, and forget the rest.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So all of the old history or anything like that. So those that do know him won't say they know him anyway.
Right. Okay.
Because they're like, he's now Cypher, so I don't know him. Even if I knew who the man he was before, it's all mystery.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Because that was one thing I was like, I don't understand how we don't know who he is, but I know who he is.
That's exactly it. Some of them will know who he is, but they just won't. You're not allowed to know, like, as it were. You can't. That's just the way it is.
Sure. Cool. Right. So the those that have been selected for this quest, they go on a march out to an assembly area. They reach their destination and form up, and the lion starts to address his men, and he tells them the moment they have been fighting for is finally here, more than 10 long years, and now Caliban is about to become theirs. And as he's talking, he spots a Calibanite eagle sat on the trees watching them, which makes him pause, and he fears like a sign to him. And then a really huge shadow just engulfs everybody who's assembled. And everybody starts panicking because no one knows what it is. Obviously, they don't know that aircrafts aren't a thing. So everyone's quite worried of what this is. Everyone but the lion are starting to think that they're about to be attacked by some flying beasts or something.
I think it's another great beast, don't they?
Yeah. Everyone's getting ready, and the lion tells Luther to put a stop to it. So he's riding around telling everyone to sheath their weapons by order of the lion, and then to do nothing without orders, which obviously people are starting to be a bit worried of why they're not getting their swords out while these beasts are attacking. And then all this smoke sort of comes up and the shadow descends, and you don't quite see what's going on. And then out of the smoke and shadows, a number of armored men wearing armor similar to the Knights of the Order appear out of the smoke. They're carrying swords and pistols similar to the Knights of the Order, but everything about them is bigger, shinier, and more impressive looking.
And works.
And works, yeah. And obviously we know they're Astartes, but these men have no idea of what's going on. One of these mystery men, approaches the lion and removes his helmet, and he introduces himself as Midris of the First Legion of the Emperor of Mankind and of Terror. And that brings us to the end of that chapter, onto chapter 15, and we're going to jump forward several weeks. And we're with Zahariel and Nemiel, who are at the fortress, and they're sort of doing their patrol, doing their rounds, and they're looking out from a tower over into what used to be heavily forested area, which is now covered in Imperial crawlers that are ripping down trees and clearing space. and Zahari was sort of reminiscing. So this is quite good because now we get a time frame of sort of where we're at, and Zahari was sort of remembering that it's been 6 months since he became a knight. The war against the Knights of Lupus and the final hunt of the beasts is done. The envoys of the Emperor have arrived, and word has gone out that they are here to reunite all the children of Terra. Old Night has ended, and they're here to sort of renew connections to those that have been lost. And I think for us in this series, this is our first mention of Old Night.
I think you're right.
So for those of us that are less educated, do you want to give us a little bit of a history tangent here?
Well, Old Night is it's used like throughout the Imperium, but it's basically a crude way of defining some of the sort of stages, if that makes sense. So you had what was it? Was it the Age of Enlightenment? We had one age, so we go back. Like the Emperor had conducted his this was pre-Emperor, but effectively mankind had moved forward. We'd conquered the stars. We were heavily reliant on AI and the abominable artificial intelligence, and created various tools and technology to help us. Things like the Men of Iron and STCs are prevalent and used by all of mankind across the it wasn't an imperium or an empire at that point, but across mankind, across the stars, to help us survive and flourish. And what happened was after this sort of period, the AI raised up against us. So you had the Men of Iron, you had the War of the Men of Iron, you had various bits and pieces that were happening, and basically the union of man, all of these planets, was broken up, and that was, I believe, that was then the Age of Strife, which is where mankind was fighting on all fronts to just survive. And then finally you had Old Night, which was the period where all of these planets got cut off from each other. So whereas previous to that you may have had trade with other planets and stuff like that, all of that was cut off. That meant some planets descended into what they call like techno barbarism. So you had techno barbarians, warlords taking over, people just all in it for themselves. Chaos ensues. On other planets like Caliban, for example, you had it became a much more feudal world. Knightly orders rose up. Other worlds, death worlds like Katachan or Fenris, it was like local tribes and much more of a tribal culture. So all of these different individuals kind of rose up during this period of Old Night. And then you had the unification and reclamation wars. So that's what happened on Terra. The Emperor then revealed himself, unified Terra, created the treaty with Mars, and then went out on the Great Crusade, as they called it, to go and reclaim the Emperor for mankind, or the Empire for mankind, and his Imperium. And that's what gets us to now. So the age, like as I said, the Age of Strife and Old Night, we're talking spanning hundreds, thousands of years, because as we learn in the first half of the book, the Lions even questioning whether terror is just a myth, and are these just stories that are passed down in folklore. And actually, Zaharia, I think, makes the point as well. The coming of these Space Marines, the amount of time that's passed, it's incredible that he's gone from being the supplicant standing outside Alderrook in the cold night, being tempted by guards, to a very short time later, effectively, probably a matter of only a couple of years, really. Seeing Adeptus Astartes land in what was presumably a Thunderhawk, which they think is some sort of great beast, and seeing Terrans, for the first time, and suddenly realizing that all of these things that they've been talking about, all of these folklore and stories that have been passed down. Actually, it's all true, and what this could mean. And I think I don't know when it happens, but I think this is when Nemiel, or at some point, Nemiel and Zaharu have the conversation again, where it's like we live in interesting times, and they say it in the first half of the book, but it's more to do with, you wouldn't normally say you live in interesting times because that would mean it's like dangerous, whereas they're saying it because of the awe and the change that's actually going on around them. And if anything, that speed of change has now leapt forward again. Now the Imperium's arrived, because I think it's Nemiel, but it definitely in more than one conversation it comes up about how quickly things are happening, how the forests have been sort of swept down as like the Imperial juggernaut lands on Caliban, and it's just like, right, let's get this sorted then. Where's our machines? And I think it is Nemiel that sort of looks at one of them and says, like, can you believe that one rider can clear like a forest of what would have taken, hundreds of men and tens of horses to very manually clear forests for land. And he's like, one rider can do it on this like insect like Imperial like fresher. I can only imagine it's a bit like Avatar, where they're clearing Pandora. I can only imagine it's a bit like that. They just sweep in and that's it. It's all gone.
And this is all, but like it must be. How would you put it into context? It's like if aliens came down here and started doing stuff, like start teleporting us around to get us places quicker. How can you compare it to what you know?
Yeah, exactly. It would be weird. What would be weirder is that they're not aliens. They're you, like, but they're like they just know a lot more. And as you can imagine, as with any human society, some of the Calibanites, some of the Calibanites, they're happy with this. This is cool. This is good. And others are like, well, hang on. Who are these guys? Why are they here? Like, where's my farm gone? Like,
and we'll get to that. The difference of opinion pretty soon. But for now, following the original envoy's arrival, they realised quite quickly that Caliban were not going to resist, probably under influence of the Lion himself. And more Imperials have started to arrive, more Astartes for a start, but also, like you said, regular humans who are now beginning to settle and spread diplomacy and sort of spread the word of the Emperor. And the rumour that's been going around is that the Emperor is heading to Caliban and he should arrive within 3 weeks. And sort of like the rumour mill was going crazy that he's 10 foot tall and shoots fire from his eyes and uses magic. And obviously the crawlers are clearing space for his arrival. So as we've touched on, Zaharu and Nemiel are definitely in awe of the technology. And something that's sort of mentioned is during a training accident, one of the supplicants has an injury where they end up having to amputate his leg. And normally he probably would have died, but a Terran apothecary stepped in, was able to save him, but also was able to regrow his leg from the stump. And I didn't know that they had this tech, because I'm sure, and this is something that gets lost, but I'm sure
I don't think it sticks around, because you're right, because it's quite interesting that they make the point that he would have either, at the very, he would have either died or at the very least been sent back to his family, because he wouldn't have been able to be a knight, right? That would have been him done. But they've managed to regrow the limb, and it's like actually what happened. Maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe it's because he's human. I don't know. But
Garrow only got a metal leg, didn't he?
I was going to say, but that might be. I don't know. Maybe it's because he's an Astarte, or maybe it's because of the wound. I don't know. But it seems much more standard behaviour that they would get an augmented limb, like a bionic limb, as opposed to regrowing it. So I don't know. Do we just call it like a bit of a difference between writers that just missed the Black Library editor. It was like, no, we can't regrow them. It's got to be mechanical.
It's got to be a fake leg, yeah.
Maybe it's just one of those things that got missed. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll put a challenge out then. If me and you can't remember, and anyone that's watching, look out for this in coming books, and we'll see if it's ever mentioned again. Yeah. Or if it's mentioned in any other Black Library book, let us know, because I'm curious to know if this is just a one-off or cool. So moving on, the Astartes are obviously here to recruit. The Calibanites don't know that quite yet, but rumours going around like they have been, and all of the knights and supplicants are getting put through rigorous battle drills and tests, which are being overseen by the Astartes. But it's mainly the younger members that are going through this. The older ones are not being selected. I mentioned that Zahariel and Nimiel are actually a couple of the oldest.
Yeah, and are they 16 at this point?
Yeah,
something like that.
They've had a hard paper around these guys, haven't they?
They really have.
Yeah. And they're like the old sweats in this, who are sort of leading by example. And as it's going on, anybody that's not up to standard is getting weeded out and put to the side. And we join Zahariel and Nemiel again, as they have lots of long training fights. And this is like where the rumors are coming up that they're going to get recruited. And Zahariel sort of jokes and says, "Well, we've been fighting so much today that if this is what it takes, I don't think I'm going to do it." So Nemiel perks up and says, "Well, I'm going to do it," and challenges him to a race, even though they're both at the point of exhaustion.
Yeah.
He said, "We're going to do 10 laps of this courtyard." So they're up. Obviously, we would go back to as we sort of hit on the last book. There is a lot of one-upmanship going on here. One can't show up the other one without the other one showing the other one up. Yeah. So they do race, and about halfway through, they're both feeling completely exhausted. And Zahariel keeps himself going by reciting the verbatim to himself, and somehow gives himself a second wind, and he speeds up, overtakes Nemiel with this new energy. And as he passes and gets stronger, it seems to sap the energy from Nemiel. And eventually he laps him and finishes like a couple of laps ahead of Nemiel. And as they're stretching and cooling off with each other, and Astartes comes over and sort of asks Zahariel how he managed to win so easily. And Zahariel says he doesn't know. And this Marine then introduces himself as Brother Librarian Israfel.
Both is Raphael, but
is Raphael. Cool. So with that, he orders him to follow him. So again, Zahariel being selected and taken by one of the leaders, I guess, which is obviously pattern now for him. So he gets taken to a meditation chamber, and he sort of gets asked by the librarian, have you ever had anything happen to you that you can't explain, or have you got any powers? And Zahariel lies and says no, but was it Raphael? Is that how I said it?
It's good enough. Good enough. It's Raphael.
Yeah. Is Raphael? There we go. Ninja Turtles. Let's remember that.
That's it.
Sees straight through the lie and laughs it off and says, "Right, now tell me truthfully, or you're going to be out. You only get one lie to me." So Zahariel admits that he has actually been able to do some unexplainable things, and tells him about what happened when he fought the Calibanite lion. And he sort of explains that he felt like he was able to slow down time, and he saw inside the lion, reached in and destroyed the heart. And Israfel is impressed and calls it Terrorsight. And he says this is a powerful but dangerous psychoactivity, and he was lucky to survive. And Zahari was worried that he's going to get excluded from the trials, but actually he gets told that this is going to give him more of a chance of passing.
Yeah.
And I think he gets sort of a special interest taken on him just for this. And then he gets told now, the reason the Astartes are here are to test the Calabanites' human genetics to see if they are suitable to become Astartes. And so far, so good. And he says it would be a shame to have to tell the Primarch they would have to abandon this planet because the genetics weren't good enough. And then he sort of has to explain what a Primarch is and that there are 19 others. So at this point, there are 19 other Primarchs.
There are, very true.
No one has been lost or redacted at this point. So we get a bit of a brief history, which actually you just covered, Shane, on our little tangent. So we won't go through it again. But yeah, the Emperor has set off with his Astartes and is reclaiming worlds, where he initially found Horus. A scouting party was sent to Caliban, and then they discovered, that looks like the lion is here.
Yeah.
And that has sort of put a detour on the Emperor's plans, and now he is bringing his entire legion in this direction, because finding a Primarch is a big deal.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So that moves us on to chapter 16. Prior to the Emperor arriving, more envoys from Terra arrive, and now massive changes are taking place on Caliban. The Terrans are sharing tech freely to the Calabanites. They're teaching them how to farm, and they're starting to actually industrialize the planet, like we was talking about before.
And like a few, like obviously now anyone in Caliban. So not only are they looking to see whether or not they can recruit for the Astartes, but the Imperial Guard or the Astra Militarum, they're actively recruiting civilians. They're like, okay, that's cool, and we come onto it. I think in a bit.
Right now.
Oh, is it? No, I'll stop. I'll wait until we get there.
So the First Legion have all ordered that all the separate orders are dissolved and they're all to be brought under one banner, which causes tension because, as we've discovered, tradition is king on this planet. Mm-hmm. The Imperial Army are now making it clear that, hey, if you're not being selected to become an Astartes and you're being ejected from the trials, or even if you haven't got that far, we're recruiting. If you want to see the stars, come join us. It's a bit of a scam, I think, knowing how the Guard does fare in battle. But yeah, they're selling it as a bit of a come on this grand adventure with us. Yep. So now they're recruiting from village by the droves, and now new regiments are being formed from the Calabanites. And some of the knights are now actually quite upset because being a warrior has always been for knights only, but now the commoners are being signed up to the infantry, or whatever branch of the army. So they're now technically becoming warriors, which was a special position, but now it's a free-for-all. You just literally need to be able to carry a gun now, which is upsetting a few people. And the forest planet of Caliban is no more. It's industrialized. The forests are being ripped down, big open spaces, and I guess it's not mentioned, but I'm assuming like factories again, shut up left, right, and center as well. Yep. And again, Sahariel and Nemil are watching the world go round, looking at the changes, and they're saying we've still got a lot to learn, even though we've been shared all this technology and we're seeing all these changes. We don't actually understand what's going on because when Zahariel was having his chat with Raphael, he said, "Oh, is the Emperor a god?" Which nearly gave him a seizure. Yeah, and told him never to say that again.
No.
So a bit of a faux pas when you're talking to an Astartes, especially in those days.
The imperial truth was, is the creed and mantra, and you know, it's one of those weird ones. How you know, in the modern setting, obviously you've got the a lot more of the faith side of things, even though the emperor himself is not down with it.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the way it is. But yeah, very much still imperial truth holds out. There's no such thing as religion.
No.
So the emperor is no god. He is just a man.
And Raphael pretty much told him, we don't believe in God and we do not like those that do.
Yeah.
And Nemiel thinks that that's very close-minded and feels like they should be more open-minded to the unknown, which is a bit of a flip on how he was at the beginning of the book, where he was quite, this is what I've been told, this is what I'm going to do. But now this new opinion's been forced on him. He's completely changed tact, which Zahariel sort of picks up on and says, like, where are you coming from with this new opinion? And Nemo tells him that there are a lot of talks going on within the ranks in secret. A lot of people are questioning what's going on in this new direction.
Yeah.
And Nemiel tells Zahariel there's a gathering going on that night in secret and wants him to come. Zahariel's obviously worried about the secret meeting, but because it's his cousin, he agrees to go. And then we have the meeting in the dark that night. So Zahariel goes to the cloister gate to meet him, and at first doesn't see Nemiel, and is about to leave when out of the shadows Nemiel appears and tells him to put his hood up, and leads him down some stairs below the circle chamber to a place called the Inner Circle. And they arrive at the meeting of the Inner Circle, and there's a group of hooded figures there, and Nemiel announces that he's brought his cousin, who he believes will share the same opinion as the rest. And this is where they're quite excited to have Zahariel, because it's obviously quite known that Zahariel shares favour with the Lion. And they say, you're going to be announced as one of the honor guard to join the Lion for the arrival of the Emperor. And they're going to plan, and this group are planning on putting a stop to the Imperials taking Caliban from them. And it turns out there's some old school knights from probably spread out from different parts of different orders, and now that they're all one, haven't been keen with this new order being formed against their will. And they're saying that the Imperials are destroying their heritage and ruining the past, and they're ruining Caliban. And Zahariel argues with them and says, no, they're here to show us the future and take us into a new age. And they say, no, it's a clever trick. Like they've used this tax because they've come as friends, so they can easily, okay, we'll give up and let them in. And now they've taken over without a fight, because these guys are starting to think, actually, the Imperials are actually threatened by them, which is mad to think. They think that these guys have seen them clear the planet of beasts and think, oh, we won't stand a chance. So they've come in with some sort of trickery. But I mean, all they have to do is look outside and see the technology that's come with them to realize, actually, maybe there is more to the Imperials than just trickery. Not that they might be wrong, but yeah, I don't think they would stand a chance if they actually did stand up to the Emperor and the first Legion that's arrived at the minute.
Indeed,
so you just have to look at their armor compared to the Astartes armor. I think that's good enough.
Yeah.
So Zahariel's like completely shocked by what's being said.
Yeah.
And he argues with them, and they say, no, we're being turned into slaves. We're going to put a stop to this. Zahariel turns to Nemiel and asks him what he thinks.
Yep.
And I think Nemiel was sort of not convinced, but he says, what choice do we have? Because I don't think he wants to argue with this new order that he's joined.
No, he kind of says, like, oh, they're just knights, sort of, you know, they're old knights blowing off steam. You know, don't worry, they don't really mean it. That's where his head is. And like Zahariel was like, no, like this is bad news, because if this sort of thing gets out, we're not going to be, we're not going to be Adeptus Astartes. We're not going to be part of the Lions Legion. When this is all going to get taken away from us. And I think Nemiel, I don't think he was lying. I don't think he thinks it is going to turn into too much. And but I think he's just kind of going along with it. But it's just I don't know. This was a bit weird. That I found this a bit weird that Nemiel kind of. I think they needed someone to be in that group to get to show us as the
bring
reader.
him in. Yeah.
That this was happening. I feel like Nemiel being that one is a bit clunky. I don't think it. It doesn't. For everything I've seen, it doesn't make.
For the payoff that we'll get to in part 4.
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense later.
No, exactly.
For now, it makes sense because they're always at odds. But the payoff that we get to, this is very weird.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Weird.
It doesn't quite sit right. But that maybe that's just me.
No. I was thinking when because even especially the second time I read it, I was trying to work out the motivation for Nemiel. I could get fine. Nemiel came to this meeting because he wants to, because he's saying I'm more open-minded. But you go back to the conversation they had a couple of days ago. Nemiel was saying, well, the Imperials should be more open-minded.
Yeah.
And now he's in this group of people that don't want to be open-minded.
It's a bit weird.
Maybe they could have developed Attius or the other one a bit more and had one of them do it. That
might have been a better way of doing it. I think I kind of agree with that.
But the two of it's a weird role that Nemiel plays here. But maybe we're missing something. But I'm on the same thought process as you with this. But as we go, so someone in this group then says, do you know what? We're not just going to stop them. What we're going to do, we're going to try and kill the Emperor outright and put a stop to this once and for all. So Zahariel, he's not having it. He storms out, and here's the rest of the men arguing behind him. Nemiel chases after him and says, well, that was intense. And Zahariel says, it wasn't intense. That was treachery.
Yeah.
And like you say, Nemiel then says, I think that was just a bunch of upset men venting. They're never going to do anything. And Zahariel says, if it's talk, then it needs to stop.
Yeah.
But if he hears it again, he will go straight to the lion. And Nemiel promises to put an end to it. Pushing us into chapter 17, the day the Emperor came to town. Tens of thousands of people have been gathered to the cleared area outside of the fortress. Zahariel rides out through the crowd and assembles with the lion, Luther, Lord Cypher, and the rest of the honor guard. Lord Cypher is eager to hurry along in order to adhere to traditions, but the lion says there's no rush and they're going to enjoy it. And Luther says to Zahariel, this is going to be an interesting day. And Zahariel says, not too interesting, I hope. And which is weird because it's going to be interesting because the Emperor's coming.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the most interesting day since.
Well, like in their life.
Since the Astartes got there,
yeah.
But I think he draws some stupid attention to himself by saying that because obviously he knows there's this plot going on or was going on.
Yeah.
And he hasn't told anybody. I think like some naivety there from him.
It's a little bit silly.
Yeah.
It's a little bit silly because all he's doing is if something did happen, which it does, but spoiler alert, we're going to get to that anyway.
No,
but
I'm joking.
he's drawing attention to himself, right?
Yeah,
he's
making himself a suspect here, isn't he?
Yeah, a person of suspicion just by saying stupid things. But then, at the same time, he is a kid, right? So maybe he's just not thinking ahead.
Yeah. But Luther might pick up on it, but he doesn't say anything. But then,
one of the questions, like as I said, you start asking yourself. Well, I started asking myself, is like, there's a lot of secrets and shadows and lies and treachery in the Dark Angels. Did
Yeah.
anyone else know about this? Like, is Luther involved?
Oh yeah.
Who knows?
Well,
I don't know. Just sprinkle that out there, but it could be.
yeah. Well, I mean, and we didn't see anyone's faces in that meeting.
No.
So we don't know who was there. We don't, like you say, you don't know who was the puppet master.
No, and we like just because they were the people there as well. You don't know who they were there, whose behalf they were there for.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't shock me, and I don't think this has come out anyway yet, not in the books at this point yet. But it wouldn't have shocked me if maybe not Luther, but someone else high up in the order had been involved, because they're not as on board with the Imperium as the Lion is.
Yeah.
We will see.
Interesting times, but not too interesting, I hope. So yeah, on Lord Cypher's command, they begin to march towards the newly constructed amphitheatre. And as they're marching in the crowd, Zahariel spots a face, which sends shiver down his spine. It's a man watching the parade very intensely, and he, unlike the rest of the crowd that have obviously got their positions, this guy is walking through the crowd, following in line with the parade. And he actually recognizes the man from the meeting, and realizes, oh crap, obviously it didn't go away, something's going to happen, and he breaks rank and marches into the crowd and starts marching towards this man. And as he's bustling through, a great light appears in the sky, which is obviously the coming of the Emperor, but Zahariel ignores it because he's focused, and he catches up with the man, and they get into a fight, and this guy says, no, I need to stop it. It needs to be this way. And Zahariel grabs this satchel that was around him, and these 6 explosive discs fall out onto the floor, and Zahariel starts to like beat this guy to a pulp. And the guy, Zahariel's over him, the guy's laying on the floor, and even though he's getting this beating, he sees what's coming down, and he sort of just freezes in shock and awe. And then Zahariel turns around to see what he's looking at, and there's this city descending from the sky. But before Zahariel can take it in, a shadow of an Astartes comes over him and yanks him into the air. And as he's being choked out, he sees Midris, who calls him a traitor.
Yep.
And then he passes out and misses the festivities, or whatever happened when the Emperor did finally arrive. And when he wakes up, he's stripped of his armor, he's left just in his robe, and he's in a bright plain cell with just a metal shelf for a bed and nothing else. And he's trying to get his bearings and think what happened. Like, did something happen? He has no idea what's happened since he's been passed out, and starts going around the cell looking for a way to either get out or communicate with somebody. When he gives up, he lays down. A door opens, and 2 Astartes drag him out. And outside the cell, his brother is Raphael.
Yep.
And then they basically drag him to a blacked out cell. Tell him to keep quiet when he tries to speak, and basically throw him onto a chair, strap him in, and demand answers. They want answers from him of what happened. They tell him that his plot failed. The attackers are stopped. And he says, no, I stopped the attack. And they say, that's the only reason that you're not being tortured right now. You're going to tell us what's going on. And Midris starts choking him again, because he just wants to kill him.
Yeah.
And Raphael tells him to stop and says, I'm going to look into him. And then he places his hand onto Zahariel's head, and Zahariel feels this instant pain, as if his hand's gone straight into his brain.
Yeah.
But Zahariel then is able to resist, and his abilities kick in. And as this happens, although it's still a dark room, it in his mind it lights up, and he can suddenly see everything. He can see who's in the room, and like when he was fighting the Caliban lion. So he hears a voice that tells him to be careful, as using his powers is dangerous.
Yeah.
And then sort of the voice stops, and he's then threatened by Midris and the other Astartes with torture, where he then agrees to tell them everything that he knows. And that's where he gives them basically everything they want. His powers then start fade away and the room goes black again, and he tells him exactly what happened up until that point, but he leaves out Nemil's name in order to protect him. And he can feel Israfel in the back of his mind trying to detect any lies. And he's just quizzed over and over again, and he has to go over and over and over again. Every little fact is like picked at, and he can feel that Israfel actually wants him to succeed. And when they're trying to get in, so he obviously leaves out Nemil's name, which is a little cloud of vagueness, and Israfel doesn't even try and touch it; he just leaves it. Which is obviously shows that Israfel before had a vested interest in him, and he's still got that, even though obviously what's happened, he obviously believes him enough. So eventually the lights go on, and Midris then changes tack completely and says, "If you're telling the truth, then we owe you a debt." And he says, it is true. You can ask Israfel directly. He was in my mind." And Israfel says, "Have I ever been wrong?" And Midris says, "Well, there's always a first time." So I don't know if that's some foreshadowing for later on, or just between those two. But then the door opens and a voice says, "He is not wrong." And the Astartes turn to see who it is and immediately kneel. And it doesn't tell us who it is, but I think you can draw two and two here. A mighty warrior enters the room, and he tells Ahariel that for his actions, he wanted to come to him personally and say thank you before you forget all of this. He senses Ahariel's power, and Israfel says to this mighty warrior, he will be ideal to join the Librarius. And this mighty warrior agrees with him, but he says, make sure that Zahar any of this, because he doesn't want any trace of dissent in his mind, because if they're not united, they will fail. Which sort of is part of his problem. If he's going to keep mind wiping people.
I was going to say this is not the first. This is like the Emperor's got. He's got past this is becoming quite run of the mill for the Big E, in that it's kind of like, well, we'll just wipe his mind, that'll be fine. And again, it's like, the whole heresy itself probably could have been avoided if there'd been a bit more open discussion rather than just do what you're told. It's the secrets and lies that unwind everything, and this is just another one. Now, Zahariel and stuff like that doesn't matter. It's actually quite throwaway in the scheme of the rest of the book, and even the Fall of Angels, which comes later. It's not really covered, but it just builds up a kind of pattern that you see with the Imperium and the Emperor, in like a kind of throwing out mind wipes left, right, and centre just because it's easier. So it's quite interesting that he just tosses them out.
It's the recipe for heresy, really, isn't it?
It really is.
So, putting our conspiracy theories and other bits behind, we'll say sometime later, lists are sent out throughout the order, and those that have been chosen to join the school, the Astartes order, not the school play, the names are out, and a parade is held outside for all those that have been selected to rise to the ranks. some included are Zahariel, Nemiel, Attius, and Eliath, the four friends, and so they are the four of the oldest, basically.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody older than 16 is selected. But Zahariel is on this parade, and he's confused because he can't really remember any of the Emperor's arrival. All he can remember are fleeting glances of a golden figure and a powerful speech, which filled him with pride and excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And once the parade is assembled, the lion gets to give a speech preparing his men for what is to come. And they are all now to join a higher order than ever before. They're going to go on to a greater quest than before, and as they are the first legion, they will bear a name that will strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. And from this day, they shall be known as the Dark Angels. And that ends part 3.
Indeed.
And now our time on Caliban is at an end as we join part 4, and we are now into the Crusade.
Yep.
So, chapter 19, I think if one thing I sort of noted here before we go on is if the Horus Heresy is your starting point into Warhammer, this is our first book that gives you a glimpse of someone going from man to Astartes.
Yep.
Not in the greatest of detail, but we're going to get to see, obviously, someone going from being human and how they're selected. And now he's obviously evolving into Astartes. And we'll jump forward now, and we get a bit of an explanation of how he is. He's now Astartes. He's bigger, better, faster, stronger, and essentially he's now immortal. He's had some training now through the Librarius, and he's got a better grasp on his psychic abilities, and he's been educated now in the dangers of the warp. So now some of this mystery and history is now sort of embedded into them. Now, the only other, I haven't, obviously, like I said, I haven't read too many books, but one book that gives you a really good sort of insight is the first trilogy for the Space Wolves with Ragnar, where you see how he goes from human to Astartes, and you see the trials in more detail, and the way like the rune priests embed the information into his mind. So then, like the Imperium, he just learns it all like the Matrix when they get plugged in. And they can download everything. So I imagine that's been for the Dark Angels, they'll have their own way, and this sort of stuff's been pushed into their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. It's the indoctrination, isn't it? So it's not only the physical tests that they have to go through and endure, and that's why they're all quite young, because, and you find this out with the chapter master, who was the commander of the sword line. And also Luther as well, I believe. They were too old to undergo the procedures that are required to become Astartes, because they're too hard on the body.
Yeah. And
so you have to be under a certain age, or young and resilient. Otherwise, you can't take to the new organs, to the changes that take place. And with the likes of Luther and what's his name?
Sahadriel.
Not Sahariel. Hadriel. Hadariel.
Yeah.
The chapter master is that they are given gene procedures and stuff like that to make them bigger, stronger, but they'll never be Astartes.
No, they're like diet Astartes.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So we get a flash forward. We're not going to get too much, obviously, detail on the exact process, but now, he's not a human anymore. He's Astartes, and the Legion now, they wear winged sword insignia on their shoulders, and as the Dark Angels, they now comprise of older Astartes from Terra, who were around prior to the existence of the First Legion, and also members who have been raised from Caliban itself.
Caliban, yeah.
Zahariel, Nemiel, and co are members of the 22nd chapter of the Dark Angels under Chapter Master Hadriel. And their mission that they are on now is to join the 4th Expeditionary Fleet above a planet designated as 4-3. Another world that was lost during Old Night, which is essentially a human inhabited planet, and this planet is named Sarosh.
Yeah.
So-
Everyone on Sarosh has a job, and all of those jobs involve organising and being an administrator. And they claim, so we find this out, and we'll go into how we find it out. But the Saroshi, they are a human population. Apparently, they do want to join the Imperium, but there's always something getting in the way, and therefore they are. So it's a big thing with the Great Crusade is they want every planet to be compliant. And when it gets to compliance, compliance basically just means they fall into line with the Imperium. They pay the Imperial tithe. They provide recruits. They provide materials depending on what the planet is like. And the Astartes can't move on until a planet is compliant. And the Astartes want to get planets compliant as soon as possible, and the two kind of different routes to that are either peaceful compliance, where they go, they're doing it and they're done, or forced compliance, where they go in with the chainswords and the bolter, and they physically make it compliant. Now, Sarosh is slightly different in that they faced no apparent martial threat. Everyone's saying, no, we're on board, we're with you, no worries. But they still haven't been able to stamp it compliant. And so that's where we get to where we are now.
Yeah. So they join the fleet orbiting above the planet. And like you say, their way is bureaucracy that's getting in the way here. There's someone somewhere just isn't putting pen to paper. And we get to meet some White Scars. They've been here for about, I think, a year or so. And essentially, they're getting sent off somewhere else. They haven't been able to make this compliant. They're getting fed up. So they're going to bring in some fresh blood under the Lion to sort this out. They're going to have a ceremony, like an official handing over ceremony, where they're going to get to obviously trade friendly small talk with the White Scars and make it official. So the White Scars and the 4th expedition are comprised of 7 ships, too small for a war fleet, but they're pretty good to sort of stay around and oversee already compliant planets. Because they've come here and there's no war going on, this has been enough. Although obviously compliance hasn't been very simple. We find out through talking to a White Scar by the name of Kurgis. Who basically says, they have been here for a year. Every time they've got solid plans in place to get the government installed, the Saroshi government have stalled or delayed, or for some reason promises just haven't been kept. There's never been any violence. It's just inaction. The Terran governor elect, who obviously once Sarosh is compliant, who would be the man left in charge, he's just been useless as well. And the White Scars are getting fed up with him. He's obviously talking to the Saroshi government, but just not putting any pressure on them to get stuff done. He's a bit soft. And they've basically been told the Dark Angels are here. They've got 2 months of a grace period, and if after 2 months this governor can't secure compliance, the Lion will be given command, and he'll get to decide how they proceed. And obviously, the Lion will probably go in quite heavy-handed. So at this ceremony, food and drinks getting dished out. Kurgis brings some wine over to Zahariel, and they they share a drinking oath where they both down their drinks and smash the cups on the floor. To the shock, a very White Scar tradition.
Yeah.
And obviously to the shock of the posh people hanging about. So Kurgis basically thanks him, saying, "I'm so glad you're here. Like, we're fed up with this, but we're really sorry that you're getting lumbered with it. No one needs to be stuck here." And while they're talking, he sort of Kurgis points out Hadariel, and asks about him, like we touched on, and says like he's bigger than the average human, but even in his power armor, he's not an Astartes.
Yeah.
And it's sort of Zahariel sort of explains what we've already talked about, and also points out the same happened to Luther, but also they sort of point out that Hadriel's very sort of aware that he's not Astartes, but even when it's brought up, he's very good at not reacting to it and just letting it go. And although he probably would have loved to have been elevated, he's at peace with what he is. He's still a commander. He was a commander on Caliban. He's proven, and even though like Zahariel now technically probably could easily wipe the floor with him, there's the respect is there with the men. So he still holds a place of command. So that's one sort of good thing that they realize this guy, he knows what he's doing. Same with Luther, like they're good warriors. Why would we leave them behind?
Yeah.
Although they could have been put into the Imperial Guard, really. But I suppose with Luther being the Lion's right-hand man all this time, he wants to keep him and give him this honor. And I suppose Hadriel fits the bill as well.
It's interesting. You can definitely tell, and like we'll come to it when we get to some of the other books as well. But this is not the first example of this happening. It happens across other chapters as well, where baseline humans who are too old for the procedure still get like augmented by gene rights or whatever it is that the Imperium do. It's not just limited to these characters. Other characters go through the sort of same process, so they're not Astartes, but they're better than human.
Yeah. Cool. So from here, Kurgis tells Zahariel that despite the Sarosh being a peaceful people, he doesn't trust them, and nor should he.
Don't trust them.
Don't put any faith into the governor-elect, because he seems to be more interested in his status than actually doing any work. And he's surrounded himself with yes men. And it feels like the Sarosh have figured out this guy is useless. And this is why they're being able to put it off for so long.
Yeah.
So the White Scars are going to leave after ceremony, and tomorrow the Saroshi government are going to be throwing a celebration for the Dark Angels. On the planet, there'll be festivals, and the representatives are going to come up to the ship and do another sort of welcome ceremony for them. So we're going to chapter 20, and for the first time, actually, so far we have not had any remembrances guiding us through the heresy, and that's about to change now, because we're going to meet a musician named Rhianna Sorrel. She's down on the planet of Sarosh with a local guide named Dusan, and one thing we'll learn now is that all of the Saroshi cover their faces with the same golden mask. So you can't tell who everybody is other than by name talking to them, and they all sort of outside in public wear the same sort of uniform. So Rhianna has been with the expedition for the entire 12 months. She's rarely been down to the surface, but she's down here now taking photos of the planet for inspiration that she will later compose music to. Dusan and her are walking around, and they're talking about how beautiful the city is, and he's telling them that there hasn't been war there for over 1,000 years, and she feels really safe and calm. walking around on this strange planet. And she's smelling these flowers that when she smells them, they sort of chill her out and keep this calm feeling on her.
Yeah, kind of intoxicating.
Yeah.
One could say.
Yeah. And she's telling him, like, she wants to record some music from the natives to help her compose something special. And he tells her to wait for the nighttime celebrations, and there'll be all the music she can handle. Back up on the ship, Zaharil sort of mulling over more of a conversation between him and the White Scar about not trusting them, and he's starting to sort of understand what's going on because he finds it strange that all the Sarosh are wearing this same golden face mask. And remembers that Kyrgyz told him there are no prisons on this planet, and there is apparently little to no crime on this planet. And Kyrgyz did a bit of digging and tells him about some data he found. And a census was conducted for the last 10 years because obviously the Imperium want to know how many people on the planet for whatever purposes, who's going to do what job. And the records of the birth and death rates were calculated, and where they compare them to how many people are actually on the planet, to how many people have died, it appears that there's an 8% displacement, meaning that over the last 10 years, 70 million people have disappeared without trace. There's no death record. There's no, they've left the planet here. And this is another planet that isn't spacefaring either. So it's not like they've been up and left. Like there's just 70 million people over 10 years that no one knows what's happened to them. So back on the planet, Rihanna is being guided through the carnival later that evening. He's taken her through all the city streets and she starts hearing the music that she's want to. She's obviously been smelling these flowers all day, so her senses are a bit dull, but she sort of is acutely aware that Dusan's got quite a tight grip on her arm, and they're walking a bit faster and faster through the city. And now, rather than being on the main streets, they're weaving in and out of alleyways. And she's starting to have trouble to talk, and her body's going numb. And she starts to think, "Oh, I've been poisoned," and asks him about it. And he sort of then turns to her and says that actually the Melachim have deemed that she is of an unclean people. And he tells her that the liar angels will not be allowed to pollute them, and she's going to be turned into a weapon against them. And he apologizes very nicely to her and then says, "But this is going to hurt." And some more figures appear out of the shadows, and he gives her to them. And as she is picked up, she manages to knock a mask, I think, and sees one of their faces, and she screams in horror as she blacks out. And we go into chapter 21. So the Saroshi are not to be trusted.
Don't trust them. Don't trust them. And that guy, I can't remember his name, but he, even though he apologizes, he also, he's apologizing because he's polite. He doesn't really come across as caring that much.
No.
He does apologize, but he's kind of like, I don't care. You're unclean. This is this will hurt, but I don't care.
Yeah, I'm not sorry this is happening to you. Sorry it's going to hurt, but tough.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So later on, the Dark Angels are getting ready to host the Sarosh government, and they're on the ship, the Invincible Reason, and the Lord High Exalter is the leader of the Sarosh. And he's been brought on board, and Nemiel jokes that he's so fat he must have eaten the missing 70 million people.
He's a big dude,
yeah. And it's strange because he's the only one. He's very different. Everyone else is very slim and almost uniform. But this guy's a big fat dude, and he doesn't wear a mask. He's the only one with his face exposed. The Lion offered, so to bring this delegation up to the ship, he offered to send a Stormbird down to pick them up, but they've insisted on coming up on their own ship. which is like a rickety old piece of junk, and they're all surprised. All the Dark Angels are surprised this thing managed to get from the planet up to the ship.
Yeah, because as
without
far as
falling
they
apart.
know, there's no spacefaring vessels, so it's, it's a surprise that they had anything that was even able to get up to the invincible region in the first place.
Yeah, I think they sort of take it as a bit of a look. We're ready. This is what we can do. And a bit of a pride. The Lord High Exalter and his companions are on board, and they exchange greetings with the Lion, and he says, "We are ready to become compliant." And he says, where are the rest of the fleet commanders? And the Lion says, there is a reception waiting. We're going to go down there now, and you'll be introduced to all the who's who of the expedition. And he's very happy, and he says that he has a lot to learn about the Imperials, and they have a lot to learn about us, and I look forward to bringing light to them all.
Mm-hmm.
So as they go, Zahariel remains behind on the embarkation deck to oversee the work, because the fleet is getting ready to deploy to go down to the planet and obviously start the role of compliance. And as he's looking around, Luther's hung around too, and they decide to go and look at the Sarosh ship and just see what's going on with that. And as they're looking at it, Luther sort of telling him this is tech from before the age of unification. And as it was coming up, the Mechanicum on board scanned it and went, "No, this is outdated. We're not interested."
Yeah.
And it was just sort of a very poor job by them. And they're sort of inspecting it and wondering why they've used this relic, because it's thousands of years old and really shouldn't have been able to get to them. And as Luther's talking, he just suddenly stops. And Zahariel looks at him and sees that Luther's gone completely pale.
Yeah.
Which is obviously unusual. So Zahariel asks him if he's okay, and Luther says he's fine. He was just distracted, and says to Zahariel, "You go back to your men and prepare them. There's nothing left for us to do here." Zahariel sort of protests because he wants to get on with it, and Luther says, "No, you go. I'll call you back when I need you."
Yeah.
Then with the Lion, he's obviously now introducing the High Lord around to all his commanders. And here the High Lord asks why the leaders are smaller than the Dark Angels. And the Lion sort of explains the difference between Astartes and human. And then he singles out Hardrill. And this is where it's sort of explained to us that he was too old to get the gene seed. And the Lion explains that the angels are a result of the Emperor's science. And the High Lord refers to them as vat grown. And they have a bit of a discussion about, the Lion says, "Do you understand the science I'm talking about?"
Yeah.
But the High Lord sort of ignores it and starts looking out the window and just completely bins off the conversation. And says this is the first time that he's seen his planet from space. Other than that old shuttle they came up on, they don't have any means of space travel. That was from a museum, and they got it working just for today.
Yeah.
And he they get into the discussion about what exactly becoming compliant means, and ask, why do you need us to be compliant? And the Lion says, well, we've come to rescue all the lost brothers of Terra. Sometimes we have to use force to get rid of unwilling or unsuitable regimes. But we don't always have to, and it's for the greater good. And sort of the Lord sort of questions it, and he says, well, it doesn't matter if you want to be rescued. You don't have a choice. We're bringing you into the fold one way or another. Like, you once came from Terra, you belong to Terra, so come back to us. And the High Lord sort of says here, well, have we been deemed unsuitable to you? And the Lion says, well, it hasn't been decided because we need to get to know you. We need to see what your plans are. And obviously there's been delays. And so it says that he's very happy that they're finally talking openly, because he's heard so far that the Saroshi have been very evasive up to this point.
Yeah.
And this is where things obviously start coming to light, because the High Lord admits that, yep, we've been doing this on purpose. But now that the Dark Angels are here, and this deadline's been placed on them, they've had to make a choice.
Yeah.
And he says to the Lion, is it true that you forbid God worshipping? And the Lion says it's true. And we share the same ideals as the Saroshi, because there's no temples on Sarosh. There's no gods to speak of. And this is why they haven't arrived and blasted them straight away, because that's the one thing they look out for, aliens and gods, and there hasn't been any of that here. So this is why they've probably been given quite some leniency as well. And this is where the High Lord tells them that he's wrong. They're a very pious people. They don't have temples or places of worship. They pray in the wilderness. And the Lion doesn't like this. He's very angry, looks around the room and demands to know why this is new information. But he can see by looking around that, nobody knew this.
No.
And the High Lord says, there's a reason you didn't know this. The Melikim ordered them to keep it secret from you. The Melikim are their gods. And the High Lord tells him that since their scouts arrived, the Imperial scouts arrived and said the Emperor doesn't allow gods. They knew from this point that the Emperor's evil, and he calls the Emperor a liar demon, which probably went down just as well as calling him a god.
Yeah, probably not the way to go.
Yeah. We'll jump back here to Zahariel, who's heading back to his men, and the words from the White Scars from earlier are still bothering him about not trusting the Sarosh. And he's also thinking about the weird reaction that he just saw from Luther, and realizes that all this time he's seen the look of a man that's been consumed by living in the shadow of somebody else. And he knows that something's wrong, and he starts to feel sick. And again, he's in a position where he's the only one who knows and the only one who can stop what's happening. So he turns around and gets back to the embarkation deck, which is now completely empty. And he marches down to the Saroshi ship and begins to inspect it. And he realizes here that this thing should never have made it up here. It's not fit for space travel. The shielding's damaged. It managed to get up here, but it's never going to survive re-entry back through the atmosphere. And this is clearly meant for a one-way trip. And now he's inspecting it with a fine-tooth comb and finds a compartment which doesn't match the rest of the design, as if it's been bolted on. And he pulls off the panels, and he's working out what he's looking for. And at this point, Luther reappears. And now Luther sort of tells him it was a weapon, some kind of atomic warhead. And Zahariel says, well, if you knew this, why didn't you act sooner?
Why are you still here?
And then we get a confession from Luther, who said that, he thought this is what he wanted, that without the Lion, he would inherit the chapter, and he would no longer have to live with this shadow that he's been struggling for some time. And he says he ordered everybody to leave, and he was just going to let this happen and tell no one about it, but realized that as soon as he'd made that decision that he could never go through with it, and realized that he was being an idiot. And now Zahariel, who had been reaching for his sword, because obviously he was going to challenge Luther. Luther tells him, "No, I'm here to help. We're going to put a stop to it."
Yeah.
And he said, and Zahariel says, "Hey, well, how do we stop this?" And Luther says, "I don't know." Elsewhere, the Lion is absolutely enraged by what he's just heard, and demands that the High Lord stops talking. And the only reason that the High Lord is here, he says, is to pass judgment on the Imperials who are unworthy. And then he puts his hand up and touches markings on his head. He then spits on the floor and says, "I spit on the Emperor, I spit on the Lion." And with that, the Lion cuts him clean in half, and back with Zahariel, the bomb in the ship starts beeping.
Yep. Ticking away.
Yeah.
Like, uh-oh.
And almost immediately, the shuttle raises into the air, and blistering heat starts pouring from it. Luther's trying to reach for the bomb, but the heat's too much for him, and he's pushed back in pain. Zahariel hits the intercom and screams out a warning through the ship. Luther joins him at the intercom, and at this point, like from the heat, his arm is completely blistered.
Yeah.
And the heat on this deck is becoming so unbearable. But Zahariel knows what he has to do, and he runs past the ship to the control panel. And as he runs through the heat, his hair is burnt from his body, and his armor begins to bubble and fail. And the ship or the shuttle sort of points in the direction of where the Lion is holding his meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The ship starts going into lockdown, and Zahariel hammers at the panel, managing to open the airlock, and everything that isn't bolted down gets sucked out into space. And unfortunately, at this point, some Imperial firemen ran into the deck to help put it out, and they get sucked out into space.
Poor fellas.
Zahariel and Luther are a bit lucky. They activate their metal magnetic boots, so they manage to obviously stay safe for now.
Yep.
And the shuttle gets ripped out into space, and then sort of spirals out of control and detonates in the atmosphere, sending up a blinding light, and the shockwave hits the ship, causing some damage throughout, but the life support systems kick in, blast doors go down, sealing the ship.
Yeah, that's it.
Luther comes over to Zahariel. They're both pretty burnt now.
Yeah.
And they say over the intercom that the Sarosh planted a bomb, and he authorizes lethal force against them. And he says we're now at war with the Saroshi. And the Lion comes over the intercom and demands all his commanders report to the war room. Down on the planet's surface, all hell breaks loose. The citizens break out in a murderous riot, killing all the members of the fleet. There were people that were down there on shore leave or down there on duties are getting massacred, but many are being abducted and disappearing, a bit like Rihanna. Any Imperial troops who were at checkpoints or whatever they were doing, they're getting overrun quickly and hacked to pieces. And then there are attacks happening on board the ship. We're not too sure at this point of what's going on, but the fleet is getting attacked from within.
Yeah.
Zahariel and Luther make it to the command deck just before the Lion arrives, and he storms in, demanding an update from the ship's captain. He notices Zahariel and Luther are both injured, but it's not mentioned. And now things have calmed down a bit. We find out there have been mutinies across the ship because people that have disappeared, or people that have been stationed here for the last year, it's become apparent that some of these people were drugged and have been mind programmed into waiting for this signal to turn on the Imperium against their will. So after things calm down and everyone's put into sort of safe measures on the fleet, a war council is gathered, and they have their astropath mistress Argenta, who informs them that the deserts of Sarosh, there are these huge psychic energy building up, and believes that some sort of Xenos creature is being summoned to attack the Dark Angels, and believes that people are being used to become hosts of these creatures from the warp. And Zahariel questions if this is even possible, and the Lion gives him a venomous glare, which forces him to be quiet, which is very strange at this point. I wonder what the Lion knows, or what the Lion thinks he knows.
I think it's more that second part. I think, and this plays out in a little bit, is that I think it's interesting with the Lion, because it's another moment where we get a chink into his character, is that he's quite suspicious.
Mm.
Like, he's also you know, he comes across, like, if you read everything that's come before, he comes across as very, you know, everyone discusses his tactical acumen and like how much of a brilliant leader he is.
Yeah.
But actually, what we've seen is that he's been kind of quick to anger. He's induced wars that didn't need to happen for his own benefit.
Yep.
And he's very, I would say he's bordering on paranoid, because there's no way he can know what's happened down on the deck where they discovered the bomb, for example. There's no way he could know what's gone on there. And rather than being more, you know, like, you know, they've saved us, his first sort of, or it seems anyway, that his first port of call is actually suspicion rather than gratitude or whatever. And he seems to come from a place of mistrust first. But
which is weird, because I mean, when we finish, we can talk about it more. But I don't feel like Zaharu was this disdain just yet.
It seems a bit harsh. It seems a bit harsh,
considering that he's he's lost all his hair and he's burnt to pieces, and he's still turned up to this war council.
Yeah, exactly. It is a little bit harsh.
Yeah. But we'll go into more right at the end. So from here, the astropath tells them that bombing this planet from orbit won't work due to the nature of this psychic energy. And brother Israfel tells the Lion he has been working with the Mechanicum to create a weapon that would counter such energies. He will need some more psychers from the Legion to help him with this weapon, and he will need to be present on the planet to detonate it. So a plan is put into place, pushing us into chapter 23, where we jump forward a bit. Zaharu, Attius, and Eliath are put into Hardrill squad, and Nemiel has been selected to go with the Lion. Zaharu's men are gathered, ready to board the Stormbird, and are given a final briefing of attack, which is more of an exposition for us, because I think they would have already known what was going to happen before boarding.
I think so, yeah.
So we go back to the meeting that we literally just left and find out that the attack is going to happen at midday. 4 Stormbirds are launched into the desert, and the target is a mining station. Zaharu's squad are going to drop straight into sort of this village by jump pack, wipe out any resistance they find, and then meet up with the Lion squad in order to get brother Israfel to where he needs to be to get the bum off. So they're on board, I guess, their Stormbird, and the signal goes off, the ramps open, and the Dark Angels descend onto the enemy. And when they land, there is no initial resistance, and everyone makes it to ground nice and safely. There's no sign of any villagers, but they can feel sort of a strange presence. They're looking around, they can see some discarded weapons and traces of blood here and there, but no sign of any life. No. Then suddenly they hear a rumble happen, and before anyone can react, a building nearby ruptures, and this huge creature emerges and attacks. It leaps straight at Attius and spits acid onto his face, which melts his helmet, and it grabs him in his arms and sort of stabs him with a dozen concealed claws in the chest area, and it just drops him to the ground and leaps off. And the Dark Angels open fire on it, but it's gone. Zaharu runs over to his friend, who's laying there writhing in pain, pulls his helmet off, and as he pulls his helmet off, he takes a lot of his face with it. An apothecary pushes him out the way and gets to work. And the remaining men continue on patrol, leaving Attius and the apothecary behind. These beasts are sort of described as reptilian, and they can quack very quickly, and they strike and they leave. And each time they strike, it draws blood. But from Zaharu's squad, only one Dark Angel is killed. Everyone else that gets attacked just get some minor injuries, other than Attius, who's obviously pretty messed up back there. And the closer they get to the objective, the more frequent these attacks come. Zahariel's squad are able to link up with the lion, and somebody cries out, and then this tide of these Xenos creatures attack, and Zahariel sort of feels something not quite right about these beasts, as if there's something in the way they move where they're not quite there, they're not quite present. There's something translucent about them. Although they can hurt them and hurt each other, they just don't quite feel like they're in place. And as these beasts are killed, they hit the sand and melt into puddles of acid. Zahariel gets hit by a beast, which manages to make a big cut through his chest armor, but luckily he's able to kill it. And then with the rest of the squad, they're able to wipe out these beasts and then head down into the mine and head underground. And we get to sort of get another look at our remembrance of friend Rihanna, who up until this point has been blindfolded and tied up in the desert. She's been there for probably a day or so now, and she's been moved to this mine, placed up against a slab of rock and tied up to it. And then Dusan removes her blindfold and says they're going to desecrate her, and she will become the Melakim, a vessel for the ancient ones who dwell behind the veil.
It sounds very grim.
Yeah, and as promised, there will be pain. No apology this time.
No.
And she looks up and screams in horror, and she sees the angel of the Saroshi. And at this point, the Dark Angels enter the mine, and the further they go, the more Zahariel can feel the effects of the warp, and he can also see that Israfel is suffering as well. They move in silence with no further opposition, and Zahariel remembers what Luther said to him. Similar to Nemil's actions with the Inner Circle, he's told nobody about what Luther said. He's told nobody about what Nemil said back before the Imperium. And he's sort of thinking to himself, he's really worried about what will happen.
Yeah.
But he's also worried that the lion somehow knows. And as he's sort of wondering about the outcome of this, the lion halts and he smells the air, smelling blood. And as they're getting closer, they can all start smelling blood. And Zahariel's actually seeing these wisps of smoke, realizing that it's psychic energy that only he and Israfel can see.
Yeah.
But he has a weird feeling that the lion can see it as well, because the lion is following the traces of smoke, but he's not sure. They then enter this cavern, and Zahariel is then immediately engulfed in emotion of so many souls screaming out in fear and pain. And Israfel tells him he needs to calm down and not let his emotions take over.
Yeah.
And in the midst of this, Rihanna is screaming out at the sight of the Melakim, which is described as a parasite, hundreds of meters wide, clinging to the ceiling, a slimy being with thousands of eyes and tentacles, almost translucent, though she can see darkness and stars through its body. And she starts crying blood, and Dusan tells her that the transformation has begun. So she's having a great time.
And yeah, I was going to say, if you hadn't guessed at this point, you know, there's a lot of chaos going on here. This is all warp spawn and, you know, ancient gods and, you know, things from beyond the veil, all that sort of jazz. It's a chaos tainted planet. They worship their gods. Those gods have, you know, I don't think that, you know, they don't call them anything by, you know, terms like chaos, but for anyone that, you know, read this far into the heresy, you kind of get the inkling that, okay, this is the hand of chaos is involved here. Quite heavily.
Definitely. Yeah. Zahariel and Israfel are psychically attacked straight away. They feel some immense pain, and they warn the lion that the creature is beginning to take form and enter reality. The Dark Angels hurry forward and emerge into the cavern and see the screaming woman fixed to a stone slab. and hooded figures chanting around her. They start to see this angel above them, and they freeze until the lion charges forward, and then the slaughter really begins. Zahariel reaches the woman on the slab, and he can see this demonic force taking over her, and he's able to sort of reach into her mind, and she simply says to him, yes. So he points his bolter at her and puts 3 bullets into her ribs, and she explodes into a gory mess. The creature above lets out this horrific roar, and the pieces of Rihanna freeze in the air and start dissolving, leaving holes in reality. And Zahariel can feel this evil, and through these holes, these dangerous tentacles come pouring out with like pointed ends, and start picking out off the Astartes. All they can do is chop at them, but these tentacles are coming out of thin air around them and start killing people left, right, and center. Things are becoming desperate. The Dark Angels are dying, trying to protect Israphael as he prepares the weapon. And as he gets ready, he shouts to Zahariel to start now. Israphael activates the device, and this loud, deep bass sound within the cavern echoes out, knocking everyone off their feet. But everyone but Israphael and Zahariel, who are standing, channeling all their energy into shutting the rifts in reality. They're able to succeed. And after the victory, the Dark Angels gather their dead and regroup and emerge back into the night air. The Stormbirds collect the soldiers. Zahariel is exhausted. The lion does not speak a word as they're leaving the mining station. And as they're getting into the Stormbirds and traveling back to the ship, Zahariel feels a real strange feeling on him and turns around and sees that the lion is staring directly at him. And that ends the book, all apart from the final chapter called Aftermath, which is very short. And this will take us 6 hours later. Zahariel finds himself above another Stormbird, and they're heading towards a ship called the Wrath of Caliban. No sooner had they returned from the battle on Sarosh, the Lion immediately set out new deployment orders, stating that he was unhappy that recruitment on Caliban was so slow. He wanted experienced Astartes to return to pick up the pace and pump those numbers. Zahariel is one of those being sent back to Caliban, but Nemil was not. Zahariel tried to find his cousin to say goodbye, but wasn't able to find him, as they only had 6 hours to sort themselves out. Although no one has said it out loud yet, the men being sent home feel very dejected and saddened that their lion no longer wants them. And the men who are being sent back include brother Israphael, Eliath, Attius, who actually survived the attack, amongst others. The Great Crusade was just beginning, and the short mission on Sarosh was over so quickly, the men feel they have hardly contributed to the Great Crusade at all. And worst of all, the crusade will continue on without them, and the crusade will also continue without Luther. And that is the end.
Indeed. Very important part there at the end. Where, again, you can see, I don't know, like he says for recruitment, but you just think, is that really what the Lion's up to? It's just interesting that he's decided to send Luther back, but also the Astartes he has decided to send back. I said it highlights that kind of distrust that that the Lion seems to have, sort of ingrained in him. And you wonder where it's come from, because he didn't have that in his, like, in how he was raised, as it were, on Caliban. No. So it's quite interesting that he has this very, distrusting nature.
Something's definitely happened to him.
Yeah.
Between part 3 and 4. So being raised as a Primarch, it's like a new personality, because before he was well humoured, happy to talk to people, knew what was going on, and I don't feel like we ever got that impression from him, especially like early on where Zahario was talking to him and he was like, "Oh, we share a bond." Blah blah. One day I want you to tell me about the how you killed this Calibanite lion. But there was never any feelings before where the lion didn't trust him.
Yeah.
And really, all Zahario hasn't done is grass up two people that he hasn't grassed up his cousin, and he hasn't grassed up someone he respects. But I don't think he even had time to do it.
Maybe that's enough for the
time
lion.
To grass,
Maybe, if the lion does know, like he's not a psyker, but then they've said like all of the Primarchs potentially have some sort of latent psychic ability. Maybe his is some sort of, as I said, lie detection, and he's like, I can't tell what it is, and it may not be for the worst, but I know you're lying. So if anyone's lying to me, I can't trust them. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's just all the people that he can sense lies in, even if those are not, like, even if they're white lies, as it were.
Yeah.
He's like, if I can sense any lying, you're gone.
Yeah.
Which would be why Luther would go, because he would know that he's lied.
Yeah.
Zahariel, even Israfrael, because he wasn't strictly honest about when he did the mind probe into Zahariel. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's something like that. You just, if you've lied, you can't be trusted.
But Nemiel has definitely lied. He's never been.
That's what I mean.
He's never been implicit in anything that's happened. But
I think though it's maybe it's only if someone's asked him. I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Because you're right, Nemiel. Maybe no one's asked him, I suppose, so he hasn't lied. He just hasn't been honest.
Yeah, but he seems to be like in the lion's new inner circle.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
So it's surely like the lion must be getting some sort of sense off of him that something's not right here. But then
maybe
he never really acted against the lion, did he? He went to a couple of meetings.
That's what I mean. And like I said, no one, I suppose, for that side of it, no one has any reason to suspect or ask him whether he's done anything like that. So maybe because that, it's just he's not picking up on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I might be stretching it a bit there. I'm just trying to work out like why. Maybe not with Zahariel, but like is Raphael, for example, would be sent back to Caliban. Maybe it's to do with the engagement with the Saroshi as well. Maybe it's like Chaos Taint. I don't like Psychers. Who knows? Could be any of it. Because is Raphael is also Terran. He's not He's not Caliban.
Sure.
So maybe there's something in that. I don't know, but definitely. They've been sent back to Caliban under this guise of helping recruitment.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like they're a number of them have been packed off and almost banished back to Caliban.
Yeah.
And we don't know why. We're not sure. Like, as I said, it's all hinting at bits and pieces with the Dark Angels, where it's all these secrets and lies and circles and inner circles and people that know and people that don't, and it definitely feels like Luther we get like somehow the lion knows or suspects and is like, right, I can't trust him, he has to go, and he's kind of lumped Zahariel in with him, even if Zahariel was actually doing it for the best. Zahariel was doing it from good intentions.
Yeah.
But it hasn't mattered.
No. He strange. He's definitely picked up the attention for the wrong reason. I mean, if anything, it's made me really want to read the next Dark Angels book to figure out what the bloody hell
what
going on. Yeah. It's done its job in making me want to crack on and get through there. But overall,
It's said. I think we summed it up best. I think at the end of the first part, and I think it still remains the case. is that it's a really, the set pieces are really good.
Yeah.
So like all of the big battles, even the stuff where like the Saroshi, what's his name, like leader, I can't remember his name, but even him and like his engagement with the lion and then what's going on Sarosh, all of that is really good.
Yeah, that's a good turn, isn't it? A good twist. I like that.
But all of the bit that lets the book down is the gaps between it are kind of, I don't know, they kind of lose a bit of impetus, and sometimes it's just needless, as I said, competition setting between Nemiel and Zaharil and you know, like bashing you over the head with some of this stuff. So there's definitely flaws, but as I said, if you can put up with them, I'll say put up with them. If you can read through them quickly enough and get to all of the set pieces, they I think balance it out. So it's, as I said, I would, you know, it's definitely one for the lore masters and one for completionists. If you want to read the Heresy, you need to read it.
Definitely.
I think it's good from a Dark Angel's point of view. I think it is one of those things that you have to get through, because then it's going to pay off. So Fallen Angels, I think, is a better book. I mean, it still suffers a little bit, don't get me wrong, but it is a better book. And everything that's gone on here builds that foundation. What I am really interested in, what the two books do really well, is tee up where else it's going. And after reading the two books, I want to keep following the chapter. I want to keep seeing what happens, but you actually move away from the Dark Angels for a bit, which, as I said, I don't know whether or not it would have been better placed as a like a Dark Angels trilogy or something like that, as opposed to part of the main Heresy. But it is important. You can't take away the fact that it is important as the part of the Heresy. So I don't know. Two minds.
Sure. I mean, I haven't read Fallen Angels yet, so it'd be good to sort of look back and compare the two and see where we are.
Yeah.
When we both got there. But yeah, I mean, and the second half, like this episode, is definitely the better half of the book.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't feel like there was no real stop-start in this one, and I think it sort of flowed a lot better. And a lot happened as well.
Yeah, it picks up more of your traditional Heresy pace, which is quite rapid. Like you barrel along, and you're like, oh, okay, then we're into this, and oh, there's a chaos demon that someone's trying to raise, and we'll do this, and then we'll do that, and it's like, from the moment almost from the moment Kyrgyz sort of says, don't trust the Sarosh or the Saroshi, it's all go. Like it's good.
It was. I mean, it's pretty much. The first part of the two parts of the book is like a 2 or 3 year period from introduction to ascension. But then those second two parts, second they arrive and join the White Scars, I think that must only happen over like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah,
because it's hello White Scars, goodbye White Scars, hello Sarosh, war. Next day onto the planet, and then 6 hours later get back to Caliban.
You're on Caliban. Like you've probably been off Caliban for a day, and you're back again. It's like what?
Yeah. Because it doesn't feel like they went on any missions. I think that was like their first mission, wasn't it?
First planetary mission, yeah. So I don't know whether they've done anything in space or anything fleet-based, but it's the first real thing. And it was kind of like a sub-mission, if anything, because it was to free up the White Scars so that the White Scars could go on and do other crusade stuff. Because although the Dark Angels are the first Legion, Lionel Johnson was I think he wasn't found until about halfway through, so half of the Primarch's already found.
Yeah.
So even though that's the first Legion, there have been other legions out and about doing stuff, getting experience and just generally being more, I suppose, useful, for want of a better word, whilst they were still looking for the line.
Yeah. So I'd be pissed off too. You don't even one quick battle, and then your whole life's been about, and then you're going back to train new recruits.
Yeah.
With no experience.
Yeah, and like he said, like I want experienced like Astartes down there. They're not those that are going back are not that experienced.
No, not really.
They've only been in one battle.
Yeah, especially if you don't count fighting Knights of Lupus. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
That's not even a space battle, is it? So he's been in 2 fights, brilliant, and now he's a recruiter. So yeah, interesting to see where this division leads.
Indeed.
Yeah. But I think unless you've got any more points, we'll wrap this episode up.
No, that's it. As I said, it's a good book. It's one for the completionist. The set pieces are amazing, so it's worth reading it for them alone.
Yeah, and like once you get through that first 2 parts, the second bit is a really easy read.
Indeed, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it for this episode. I think we've done probably 2 hours nearly.
I think we have, yeah.
So our next episode will be going into Legion, and we'll be going to the Alpha Legion and some other bits and pieces around there, which again I'm looking forward to reading again. That was a good book.
I'm looking forward to it. Like the enigmatic Alpha Legion and opening up all sorts of lore with John Grammaticus and the Cabal.
Yes.
So that's going to be. It's probably going to. Well, I mean, I say it's going to be a long one. They've all been long.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I'd imagine, going to be at least a 2-parter because there's a lot to dig into.
Yeah. We'll work out. I'll have to read it again and just remember quite how much, because this is definitely one where a lot happened and there's a lot of characters as well.
Huge amount of characters. A lot of them human characters as well, which is nice. But quite an interesting legion and definitely interesting bits and pieces that come up. And
a lot of names to remember, because there's a lot of characters in this that have a lot of parts. We'll get to it. But thanks for watching with us and joining in. Let us know what you think of this book and how we've done. But that's it. Check us out, Iron and Ceramite. However, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like, share button. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, if you're on podcast sites, thank you very much. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Iron and Ceramite. Easy to find us. And we'll see you on the next episode.